a competent communicator. And this motivation comes from two sources. The first one is external. This is the motivation driven by the circumstances around you, your job, your living conditions, your necessary contacts. For instance, my friends who work with international companies, who work on international markets, whether they want it or they don't, they have to study cross-cultural communication. It's the necessity of their work. Some of them maybe don't care, but they have to. And that's the external motivation. You, as you take this class, again, it is your external motivation to go and study this simply because you get a grade for it. Now, internal motivation is developed when you find that you will benefit clearly, personally, from being competent in this area. And this is where your personal improvement begins. So if you want to develop a true understanding of cross-cultural communication, then you need to find in yourself why it is important for you to become cross-culturally competent. To give you some examples, for me, not only does it give me my job to teach you guys and to teach English online, it also gives me an opportunity to maintain contact with my friends from all over the world. And I find it so fascinating and so important that to this day, I'm learning as much as I can from the circumstances in which I find myself. I learn cultural knowledge on a daily basis, do something to encourage myself to learn a little more. I read publications, I follow the cross-cultural news, I try to follow the new intercultural textbooks, etc., etc., etc. So always try to find some kind of external motivation to teach yourself a little bit more about cross-cultural communication every day. Secondly, your second component of cross-cultural communication competence is your knowledge. The knowledge comes in three forms. The first one is the personal knowledge, the knowledge of acquaintance, something that you know after learning it as a personal fact. For instance, my favorite Japanese fairy tales. They're very ferocious, they're very scary. At the same time, they're very interesting. And so personal knowledge of these Japanese fairy tales gives me a glimpse into the Japanese culture. And I start enjoying the culture more because I know about its fairy tales. I've also read lots of Danish fairy tales by Andersen, and of course, Russian fairy tales. And this knowledge gives me an inner look on what the culture considers to be an appropriate topic for such type of literature. The second is your procedural knowledge of how to do something. And this you can only learn if you go to the culture and you get engaged with the culture. For instance, from going to America, I know how to behave in churches of different denominations. Or, for instance, I know what it is to contribute to discussion in an American language class or in an American communication class. Because in Russia, you really don't have to participate in the discussion, especially if it is a large lecture class like right now. However, in America, I learned that I had to participate very actively in the discussion because if I didn't, I wouldn't get a grade. And that's procedural knowledge. And finally, the propositional knowledge of facts. This is also important because when you learn some material that informs a particular discipline, it is very important that you understand the facts that are involved with it. So your knowledge consists of these three important tenets. Next is your skills, what you need to do to become a competent communicator. Number one, you will have to learn to listen. This involves listening to yourself, making sure that you sound engaging and interesting for the audience, tailoring what you say to your audience, but it also, and more importantly, means listening to whoever is talking to you, that you hear every word they say, that you understand their intentions. The second important skill is to observe the behavior of others and therefore deciding as to what it is that they do that is effective and informative in that particular context. So analyzing is the next step and includes, after watching, what do you do to make sense of what is going on in the culture and what is going on in this particular situation. To give you an example, if you observe people behaving in a certain way at a certain event, you have to analyze and say to yourself, why are these people doing these things? Why are they behaving in such a way? For instance, the thing I remember was going to a parade, and you know how in Russia we go to watch parades. We would probably come and just stand in the middle, in on the sidewalk, and watch the parade. That's it. In America, when I went to watch the parade, I observed that people were taking chairs, that people were bringing lots of lemonade and lots of cookies, and I didn't realize how long this process was in America. There was a couple of hours at least, and so people used to sit down, munch on something, drink something, and I had to observe and analyze so as to prepare for my next event that I attended. You must also always take very good care to interpret what you see in three different formats. Interpret it for yourself, interpret it for the other party in the cultural exchange, and interpret it for the outsiders, people who watch it without being the participants of the cultural event. This gives you an understanding, a better understanding of how and why people act in a certain way after observing a certain type of cultural event. To give you an example, people who go and watch Russian football, when they come to the stadium and they see what is going on there, if they come from the culture with very little exposure to football, they would first be probably intimidated by the noise, by the actions of people around them, because it might seem as being very aggressive. But if they get into the game, if they give themselves the work to look around carefully, observe, analyze, and then try to interpret it in three different ways, they will probably get to see the engagement, the fun, the attention that these fans are giving the public. They might again, though, find and interpret it differently, find it as an aggressive group of people screaming and probably even fighting, and then they'll make a totally different set of conclusions. It really depends on how you interpret it. And finally, all these skills, listening, observing, analyzing, and interpreting, must be applied in particular contexts, in particular circumstances. You should take that knowledge and use it in new cultural context. That's skills. Now, you have to be extremely sensitive to other people and their work and what you encounter, as you develop your competence. First, learn to be flexible. Flexible means accepting things that are maybe not as comfortable for you in the culture that you were brought up in. Learn to become adaptable to um, how other people handle a particular cultural situation. To give you an example, when I came to America, it was very hard for me to eat the American way because most people just grab a plate and sit down on a chair and eat sitting on a chair, not sitting at the table, as we, the Russian people back at the time, used to eat sitting down at the table. And it was very hard for me. But I decided that I needed that flexibility to learn, and I learned in a short while. The picnics were even harder for me, or, for instance, participating in lectures. I had to understand that although I learned my material, I needed to be flexible and adapt to whichever formats the teacher offered in the course. Secondly, you need to be patient. It takes time, it is difficult. You need to learn new ways. So you will have to be not rushing yourself towards competence. It will come to you with time. Next, be empathic to people that you work with. Try to understand where they are coming from. What is their expectations? Why are people behaving a certain way? One example that I remember was going to a doctor in America, and I was not feeling very well when I came to that doctor. And the doctor asked me, "How are you?" And I told him, "Well, doctor, if I'm here to see you, I guess I'm not too well." And the doctor said, "No, no, no, no. You should, every time you should say, 'Fine, I'm fine,' because that's what we expect to hear. Then as we talk, we will find out more. But this is just the way it's done. You can say, at most, you can say, 'I'm not too well, thank you for asking,' something like this. But you don't have to start immediately telling me all the troubles and all the problems. You have to be empathic and try to understand where he's coming from. This is not a story of how you are. It's a greeting. And as such, you need to understand how to behave in this situation. Then the next thing you need to do with your sensitivity is be curious. Always try and develop the sort of curiosity that takes you to different experiences. I think I told you, maybe I haven't this year, but I went to a Black Baptist church, and I'm very happy I did. And it was a tremendous experience. And I was driven by my curiosity because I had never been in such a place. And this is predominantly a Black congregation, like 90% of people in the church are Black, and they sing and they praise God, and it's very noisy. And the pastor is running around and telling funny stories, and everybody's laughing and everybody's talking back to the pastor. And it was so unusual for me. Yet at the same time, I learned an important lesson when the whole congregation looked at me, and the pastor said, "Our brother is from Russia." And those were the days right after the Russian democratic transformation in 1991, after the coup. And the pastor said, "I would like us all to pray for Russia." And it is a touching moment in my heart to this day when I felt the power of the prayer of more than 200 people praying for me and my country. And that was so warm and so loving and that I remember to this day. And finally, learn to be open and comfortable with whatever you are offered. There is a theory of communication that says that you should only resist communication that is not friendly. 99% of the situations that you will encounter in cross-cultural business, when you do business contacts, when you meet new people to discuss certain economic endeavors, 99% of these transactions are going to be friendly. And because they're friendly, try to be comfortable and open with what they will offer you to do, the kinds of cultural practices that they will invite you to join in. Because usually, again, like 99% of the time, those would be nice, friendly, welcoming circumstances in which, if you participate, you will only make your hosts feel better. So even if they ask you to do something very unusual or something that you have never done before, humor your guests, humor your hosts, and behave like a good guest and get engaged. Um, I don't know, for example, I went to, for the first time in my life ever, I went with a group of Russian immigrant women who were all Jewish to attend a Jewish Sabbath. And according to the tradition, there should be a man at the table at any Sabbath. And therefore, my hosts told me the things I had to do as the only man at the table. And I followed that. And it was challenging for me to do some of the things that we were doing. But after I did that, it felt really good. It felt really good. I ended up making friends with all these wonderful people. And with some of them to this day, we keep in touch. And that was a moment of just a couple of hours in 1993. That's almost 30 years ago. So that's sensitivity that you should develop as a communication professional. Now, there are two features of developing good character. This will be your personal history with communicating with different people. This is called the algebraic impression, the sum of impressions that certain people, certain group of people have about you. For instance, you and I, we have been working together for the entire semester. Over this semester, you have developed a certain set of expectations as to how to communicate with me, and I have developed a certain set of expectations as to how to communicate with you guys. And to this end, we have put together an algebraic impression, a collection of small pieces of impression as to what to expect. And your character shows in your ability to build a positive algebraic impression, because, of course, naturally, it could also be negative. It could also be very destructive. And I'm sure that you have met people who, after you talk to them on a number of occasions, produce such an unpleasant impression upon you and everybody else that nobody is actually hot to communicate with them unless they really have to. And surprisingly for me, in many, many ways, was that last year your colleagues voted me as their best teacher in the minor program. And I was very humbled and I was very impressed. And I said, thank you guys for doing this for me. It felt really great. And that meant, in a way, that the algebraic impression that I created in the minds of my students last year was good enough for them to go ahead and nominate me. And I was very, very much appreciative. You will also do well if you give the people with whom you communicate on a daily basis some kind of feedback as to how they stand in your eyes. If they have a positive algebraic impression, give them that feedback. Tell them that you enjoy talking to them, that you enjoy being a part of their life. And don't forget to provide a mutual benefit. Do something for the people that make you happy. Some of my friends in Vkontakte have been friends with me since before the Vkontakte came to be, which is more than 25 years. And that fact alone tells me that I'm not doing too badly on that front. And I wish every one of you to have the same kind of stability in how you maintain friendships and contacts and how you create this huge algebraic impression. It is not enough to just form an impression. You must exhibit this history in your day-to-day actions. Because, for instance, you and I will meet maybe once again in class during the final presentations on the 26th. Dr. Lisowski told me that he wants us both to do the final assessment together, so I will see all of you at the assessment on the 26th. And after that, we will probably not see each other again in the academic context, unless some of you perhaps one day will come and have a practicum at Ego Translating Company, where I am the practicum director for translation students, linguists, but perhaps, some other time I might have like a management practicum or something, and you join me again and we meet each other again, we will be done being face-to-face communicants. However, in the world of social networks, I'm sure that we will stay in touch. And for many years after we are done being teacher and student, we keep in touch with my former students through me watching what they do, they watching what I do, exchanging letters, exchanging comments, exchanging birthday wishes. And this exhibition of our history maintains and reinforces the algebraic impression. So both of these are extremely important for you to promote yourself among other people and for you to get feedback about what other people are doing and how they feel towards you. Okay, that's the good character. Make some noise. Is there anyone in the audience?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Because
Yes.
I'm looking at the screen. There is nothing going on. I don't see your faces. I don't even see your names. It's like, who am I talking to? All right. How can you become more aware of these skills? First and foremost, study and appreciate your own culture, its own history. There is so little, so terribly little that we know about the history of Russia. There is so little that we know about the histories of the countries that we visit. You can do that by studying the culture's artifacts, narratives, and rituals, meaningful cultural objects, stories that people tell, and various rituals in which people participate. When you study your own immersion into your own culture, study the way in which your gender, your ethnicity, your family, age, religion, profession, and other life experiences influence your situation. As I get older and still continue doing what I have been doing for the past 30 years, my perception of what I do and how I do it is changing. Um, my professional expertise changes and hopefully develops further. My family situation becomes more and more important to me as I age. Um, my gender, no, well, I wouldn't say it affects it all that much. But when I was a young man, men in teaching professions were very rare. And back then, my gender meant a whole lot to me that I was a man, a young man at the time, going to become a school teacher. And there were quite a few people who said, "What the hell are you doing?" But now this situation has changed. And so as you study these changes on the social identity wheel, make sure you update your own perception of yourself. You should also work very hard to examine the stereotypes and prejudices and opinions that you carry, because this bias exists whether we want it or not. To try and avoid these bias, what you should do is try the describe, interpret, evaluate method that we talked about during one of our seminars. Try to describe in objective terms what it is that you see, interpret it in 3 ways, and evaluate your possible participation. Or ask 5 why questions, or ask 5 questions starting with W: who, what, when, where, and why. Asking this many different questions, trying to explore the deep underlying reason for why people do something in the cultural situation, will help you to interpret and evaluate your participation better than you would otherwise if you just watched. So ask yourself many questions. Now, also, do try to understand your communication style. Your communication style comes in several different varieties. Try and observe yourself, perhaps through recording yourself, perhaps for asking for more detailed context, asking for feedback from your interlocutors who will tell you how they perceive you as a communicator. Try and craft the kind of impression that you want to leave on your audience. Do that consciously. Try to change the things that you will find annoying in your own communication style when you watch it as an outsider. Do understand that very often in cultural settings, you have to behave a certain way to produce a professional impression. For my international students in my audience today, in Russia, teachers who want to become viewed as being professional must be quite calm and very solemn, if you allow me to use that word. But if you go to America, you will find many teachers being fun, being humorous, cracking jokes, behaving informally, sitting on desks, asking people to call them by their first name or even by their nickname. And this would be so unusual if you did that in Russia. That would be so crazy if you did that in Russia. So always tailor your communication style that you exhibit to the kind of the cultural situation in which you find yourself. The next good thing you can do is monitor your own behavior. You discover what is appropriate in each situation, and you try to gain control of your emotional reactions to different situations in which you find yourself. Try, as I said previously, to create and maintain good impressions. And as you move from one situation to the next, try and modify your behavior. Try and change as much of your behavior that you think is necessary to improve the algebraic impression that we are talking about, that we have been talking about a couple of slides ago. What you should also do is try and monitor how other people react emotionally. When I see, for instance, that something of what I said influenced some of you guys, and I see an emotional reaction of some sort, I always try to later maintain that, do something to produce the same impression. Next thing that you should do is never use hidden tactics. When I teach you guys, I always try to, and I hope I succeeded. If I haven't, please tell me, because that's something that I really want to eliminate. I've always tried to be an open tactics teacher. That is, I always told you what it is that I'm going to ask you, say, for instance, at an exam, and I always told you what it is that I expect, as for instance, during presentations. And I never ever try to fool you into believing that, something is going to be otherwise. I always try to use open tactics. Same is useful in business, same is useful in your personal relationships. If you are hiding something, if you are trying to fool your way through communication circumstances, you are not going to get very far. So please be open in your tactics with others. If you found that in some ways I have not revealed what I should have revealed, please tell me, because I'm working hard on being sure I'm open with you guys as much as I can. Next, whenever you go to a different culture, monitor very carefully whether what you do is culturally acceptable. I still remember a wild night in Turkey. We were in a hotel that was pretty high class, and everybody was quite respectable. And then one night, a group of Russian tourists arrived. And we were in the so-called quiet wing, where they put people who are quiet. And a big group of Russian tourists created a lot of noise in the middle of the night. Now, if they were in Russia, they would probably be not so much of a problem, because they were not being like extremely loud or extremely difficult. They were just celebrating, and there was some noise. But in that quiet context, it seemed like the whole world has broken apart. And our security people had to go to their room, knock on their door, and ask them to be quiet. And it was not culturally acceptable at that particular moment in that particular place. Or, for instance, who you hug, as Michelle Obama hugging the Queen of England, which was not culturally acceptable. She didn't know that. She didn't know any better, especially since the Queen hugged her back, which was very sweet. But you don't touch the royal person unless she or he extends their own hand first. And finally, learn to accept differences. People come in different shapes and forms. and beliefs and sets of values. And if you're flexible enough to accept these differences, you will be better off yourself. So that's improving your empathy. Now, when you go to a different culture, adapt to the host culture by learning the language. When I came to Estonia, the first thing I started doing, actually before I came to Estonia, I took lessons in the Estonian language, and I learned to say a few phrases. And when I came to Estonia, I took an intensive language course, and I tried wherever I could to speak the language. And that scored me lots of points with the Estonian people. Secondly, when you are in a certain host culture, learn the social events. How do you greet each other? How do you eat? How do you go visiting? How do you host? And also adapt to the changes on how you do familiar things, and try and make as many personal contacts as is appropriate. For instance, the Estonian people that I came to know are very, very private. And because they're so very private, it is difficult for them to open up, to invite you to their apartment, um, stuff like that. So if when you make personal contacts, you must make sure that you don't encroach on the culture's personal space. Try and uh, try to match the level of publicness of your presence to what the culture believes is appropriate. So that's about adapting to host culture. Now, there are a number of parameters of intercultural communication ethics. I teach English online these days. And when I teach English, some of my students who come to me, they want to show that they know a lot of English. And so they start saying words like yeah and gonna, wanna, sorta, kinda, and all the other slang terms and idioms. Uh, and I always tell them that unless you can speak brilliantly and you can speak fast and you make absolutely no mistakes, using these contractions and using these slang terms only makes it worse. So until you are professional, until you can speak the language very smoothly, avoid using slang and idioms. Focus on specific denotative meanings. Secondly, listen very carefully and always ask for confirmation or check your understanding if you are not sure you understood correctly, especially if it is an accent that requires interpretation. For instance, the Scottish English, the Scottish British English, is tremendously difficult to understand, to the point where it is absolutely unintelligible. I had a client who came to Ego Translating, and she had to make a call to a bank in Edinburgh, in Scotland. And I called to the bank, and I swear to God, people, I could not understand one single word. And I kept asking, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, is there anyone in the office that speaks more conventional English? I'm sorry, I can't understand you. And they finally found one person who spoke the kind of language that I could understand. And that was very important because that gave me the understanding of what they wanted. Thirdly, make sure that you don't mispronounce things. that you do not say shit instead of sheet and piss instead of peace. For instance, these are the two words in English that get confused so often, making terrible impression on whoever you are talking to. Next, use the local communication formalities and styles and monitor as much as you can your body language. Finally, read what you can about the host culture's perception of your culture. When I go to other countries and I have to deal with the general perception of Russian people, and you have given that perception to me throughout the presentations on every topic. You talked about how Russian people are at times viewed as being rude, or we are viewed as being not very responsible and not quite reliable, et cetera, et cetera. You told lots of things in your presentations where you characterized the Russian culture not very flatteringly. And I remember telling you on several occasions, some of you, that this has changed. Russian people, the new generation, the people between 30 and 40 already, they are a much better portrait of a global culture, a global participant of cultural exchanges than Russian people had been 45, 50, 60 years ago, when we were not at all experienced in cross-cultural context. But still, the old perceptions prevail, and we must work hard to overcome them. At the same time, try and be open to your perceptions of the other culture. No matter what politicians do, and politicians sometimes do crazy things. For instance, I don't know, I haven't seen a decent American president since Clinton. After that, all the people in office were crazy in one way or another. Don't let the perception of what the political leaders do to cloud the perception of what ordinary people do, because very often ordinary people would disagree with their leaders, with how they express themselves, with what they say. And if you project the political leader's attitude to the people of his or her country, you may be very, very, very wrong. Remember Donald Trump, for instance, who was coming across as rash and very irreverent and very boorish in many ways with whoever he came into contact with. His behavior shouldn't have been projected towards all of American people, because I know many, actually the vast majority of the American people that I know are nice, friendly, open, helpful, very honest, very ready to assist you, very ready to give you whatever they have. And you should not judge who they are by their president, and or by any other loud representatives of culture that surface, I don't know, in social media and present a certain brash image of the culture. Always go and look and talk to ordinary people and try to find out what it is that they are and what qualities they display, and then form your perception. So what's going to happen in the future, and this is the final segment of my final lecture. What is going to happen with the cross-cultural communication in the future? First and foremost, sadly, cultures will be lost. So if you can, and if your job takes you in that direction, do what you can to protect the culture by recording events, knowledge, languages, practices. Even if what you do is a simple blog, even if what you do is a series of pictures that you take for your family album, if it is only a recording that you make of your own performance of some traditional folklore, all these actions will keep cultures alive, will help keep cultures alive. The real life example of this protection is the revival of what we now know as modern Hebrew. Hebrew, some 70 years ago, used to be a dead language, the language of almost entirely the religious services and the language of the Torah, but it has been revived when the state of Israel was founded, and now there are millions of speakers of Hebrew. Unless there were people back then, unless there were scholars who had kept the dead language alive, at least in their hearts, more so in their work, they would not have been able to recreate Hebrew as we see it today. So that's one way. The next future of cross-cultural communication is habits will be changing. And for instance, when I was a child, my grandparents were peasants, and because they were peasants, their dinners that took place at 2 or 3 in the afternoon used to last a couple of hours. Why? Simply because that was the only rest for peasants during the day. So my grandmother would have a very long dinner, to eat very slowly, to talk about things, to relax and watch TV, perhaps read a paper, do something, but all of us together at the table for at least an hour and a half. And when I returned from America after my first visit, I came back home and I started gulping the food the American way, 15 minutes and I'm gone. Uh, uh, did I offend my poor grandmother? God bless her soul. She was a very sweet person. So if you can, and especially if you find it interesting, conserve the old habits of the culture. For instance, if you can host a traditional Russian dinner that would last a couple of hours, do so. Invite people, treat them to lots of food, lots of fun, lots of talk. Show them why this past tradition is a good thing to do. Maybe you will help revive some of those excellent traditions. Secondly, some people do costume balls. Some people do carnivals. Some people do battle reconstruction. All these examples help us bring back the habits of the past. One of my friends is a reconstruction fan, and he says that reconstruction involves not only replaying a battle, but the entire surrounding thing, like they cook dinner the traditional way for that particular culture in that particular time period. They dress appropriately for the era. They even try to use the language that was appropriate at the time of the event that they're trying to reconstruct. The next thing that is going to happen to the culture is cultures are going to continue integrating. And so the global community, for instance, has been formed online. And many young people, people your age, and even people who are, I don't know, 10 years older than you are, they are becoming more and more global. And anywhere where people have access to the internet, young people, and even now middle-aged people, are pretty much the same because they have developed this global sense of the global community. Same is happening slowly but surely with people from all over the world. In the countries in which there is no restriction of movement, we cannot say this about, I don't know, North Korea, or I don't know, Iran, or some other places where people, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, where it may be a challenge to leave the country, go and travel. Um, I'm sorry, I guess I should have said Turkmenistan only. Tajikistan is much more open, in fact. Turkmenistan is pretty hard to leave, and North Korea is pretty hard to leave, and several other countries on the globe that are hard to leave. Their people, their citizens, will have more trouble integrating simply because they don't know how to. And the internet might be very extremely limited, if even perhaps non-existent. And then the citizens of these cultures will have it much harder integrating into the global community. Now, as long as there is access to the internet and people can communicate globally and learn English, the global integration is taking place, and more generations of young people become absolutely familiar with the global practices. So this will continue going on. The next, there is also the practice of diffusion, when practices of one culture become practices of all world cultures. Many examples of this come from Japan. Sumo has become an increasingly international sport, for instance. I've been to a Go championship where people play the Japanese table game of Go. Go to any restaurant and you will find sushi and sashimi and all the other Japanese delicacies served all over the world, as is, by the way, the Chinese culture. Same thing. Chinese cuisine and Italian cuisine and Japanese cuisine, they're really global. But this concerns not only food, but also sports. It also concerns not only sports, but also songs that people sing. And this global integration could be seen yesterday as Manisha performed for Russia. And I thought that she did a very good job. And has anyone watched, guys, Eurovision? Yes. Uh-huh. Yesterday night, I think she did a pretty good job. She was so engaging. She was lots of fun to watch. Although whether this song really represents Russia, I don't know. I don't know. But I thought it was pretty much fun. So I expect her to do very well in the finals. This is diffusion in action. When you see people from other cultures becoming part of their host culture, that is an example of diffusion. Myself, I view myself as a Russian citizen, but most of what I teach and how I do it goes back to my days at the American university where I taught. So my teaching, the method with which I teach is quite American, yet I am probably more versed in giving lectures as opposed to seminars, as compared to my colleagues, American teachers, who give classes. So diffusion goes both ways. Practices of one culture become practices of other cultures' worlds. Actually, my American students, by the way, really appreciated the lectures because nobody ever explained the book to them. They had to go and read the book and then come back and talk about it. And I would always spend at least one class explaining the book, and they really appreciated it. And so I had many international students in my class always, and I always had lots of student athletes because they found it very difficult to understand the books. So I had to give them lectures, and they really appreciated that. And that was the example of diffusion. Now, the next thing that is going to take place is people are going to start having and already have different identities for communication in different circumstances. I don't know, I don't remember if I told you, but I do have, good God, let me count, at least three different identities that I can remember. One is that of a teacher at Vishka. That's one identity. My second other identity is a translator. I'm a very different person when I work as a translator. Um, and my character is different. My behavior is different. My nonverbals even might be different when I work as a translator. And then I am a blogger. And as a blogger, for the past 10 years, I've had a blog on football. And as a blogger on football, I have an entirely different identity. The stories that I write about football are humorous, they're cheeky, they are at times quite nasty to my characters. I make fun of them, hopefully in a good natured way. And from what I hear from my readers, they appreciate this. And that's a totally different identity. So, and then I also have the identity of a poet. So many identities that I have that I use in different circumstances. And when the different identities meet, people may not even recognize me. So those of you who listen to me read my poetry on my Kontakte page, you may hear the difference between how I teach you guys and how I read poems, for instance. So this is only made possible by the internet and the way we communicate online. So this will continue. The only problem is don't let your identities come into conflict with one another. Do harmonize them and don't mix them up. Sometimes mixing your identities can lead to, if not a personal tragedy, then at times very embarrassing situations. So please watch for that. The next thing that is going to happen, and that's what we're seeing now, right now, as we do this final lecture, virtual jobs and teams are becoming more and more predominant. And as we start working online in virtual teams, we create a new dynamic in our cross-cultural communication. So get ready that most of your jobs will be moved online in one way or another. And the fact that I'm sitting here at home doing the lecture and not being physically at Vyshka building in Kantemirovskaya ulica signifies to the fact that this is happening. A real life example is my friend Sergey, who is a computer designer. He works from his computer and he usually lives on a cruise ship, travels all year round, living on different cruise ships, doesn't have a proper home, but he's happy that way. He visits all kinds of fun places. He doesn't have to care about food or laundry or whatever. Every of his need is taken care of by the crew of the cruise ship, and he works on the computer as a designer. And this will become, and now myself, I teach English now 60 hours a week, for goodness sakes. And as I teach English, I've also become very independent. I can do it from wherever I want. So I'm now working on losing some weight. And then after I hopefully lose some, I will probably travel much more than I used to. And that's the future of cross-cultural communication. That's what's going to happen to all of us and all of our jobs. And it's happening very quickly, not least because of the pandemic. That's it, my friends. This is my my presentation to you guys. Are there any questions, comments on the content of what we talked about today?
Everything is clear.
Everything is clear. Good. Then I have another thing that I wanted to talk to you about. Is the message from Dr. Lisowski for the requirements for the final project. Have you received it?
Yes,
Yes, we
there
did.
are emails.
Okay.
Yes.
Here they are. You should submit your presentation and your text document in which you describe um, particulars of communication styles, and you should choose 3 aspects from my lectures, any topic, verbal, nonverbal, perception, identity, imperatives, whichever you like, 3 aspects. And this means that you choose not the entire topic. You choose a particular aspect in a topic. So you don't have to do the entire thing on verbals or the entire things on nonverbals. You can choose to talk, for instance, about gestures, and then talk about speech acts, and then talk about cultural imperatives. So 3 things from my lectures should go into your presentation. The second is negotiations, and then recommendations and mutual interests. Okay. Here are some of the links for you guys. Also, I myself personally have a gazillion million books and articles on different aspects. So if you ever need any information on what to say in your final presentation, do send me a message, and when I find time, I will respond. If I don't respond, please forgive me, because as I said, I'm doing 60 hours of English lessons a week. But I'll try. Whenever I find time, I will try to answer. On Sunday, this coming Sunday, starting at 1:30 or around there somewhere, I will be online in Skype, and I don't know if this is my Skype address. Let me write it down. I will be online in Skype from 1:30 till about maybe 4. And I will be happy to look at your presentations, and I will be happy to tell you whether, in my opinion, you are headed towards the right product. Okay, so please use this opportunity when it is possible. Okay, add me in Skype, and let's talk through your presentations on Sunday. Any questions that are left? No? Okay, then I
Excuse me,
have.
Mr. Morozov, I have
Yeah,
a
sure.
question.
Yeah.
What is the time limit for our presentation?
The run through for on Sunday. I will be there at 1:30. And
So I mean,
I will be in
so I
Skype
mean, do we have 15 or 20 minutes for the presentation? Just
for the
exactly.
for the final presentation in our class. Do you mean the presentation in
Yes.
class? You will have to ask Dr. Lisowski. I would imagine it used to be 20 minutes. 20 minutes per group.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
But I think that he has sent a schedule. Let me see. There is a schedule. Here it is. The schedule. Wait, no, this is, he sent me something else. Sorry, that's not it. But there is a separate schedule for the in which sequence he would like you to present. And when he sends this to you, check it and ask him if you find him as to how many minutes does he want you to go. In my experience, it was 20 minutes.
Okay, may I ask another question?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
When should we upload our presentations to LMS?
You should ask that to Dr. Lisowski because I don't even have access to the LMS.
Okay.
He told me that he created projects for you. And so if you go to the LMS and you look at the projects, you will see where what the deadline is for these projects. Okay. Anybody? Anything? All right, then. I will see all of you because we'll be seeing you guys together. I will see all of you on the 26th in a week. And if you want to come and run the presentation through me on Sunday, I will dedicate my Sunday afternoon from 1:30 to about 4 p.m. To answer your questions and give you comments on your work. All right?
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I will see you in a week then. And the final seminar in whenever it is, let me see. The final seminar with group 2 will be in half an hour at 14:40. See you there. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.